It's time for the 32081 Scoreboard Show. Let's recap the latest weekly scores and highlights from around the county.
And thank you for listening to this episode of the 32081 Scoreboard Show. I'm the Todd, and as always, here he is, the man, the myth, the legend, the hardest working man, or even press person, for that matter, anyone in St. Johns County for high school sports, Mr. Anthony Richards. How you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing great, Todd. Ready to recap an exciting week and then look forward to an even more exciting week.
I don't think we're not going to have an exciting week from here on out. I really don't.
Yeah.
Let's start off, since we wanted to talk about Ponte Vedra first last week, about their game against Beachside. I do want to bring up one thing. I texted with Brian Case after the game, and I asked him, I said, what happened after the Nease loss to really seem to put them on a roll? Because you and I talked about it, right? We said, listen, there's one or two things that can happen after this game being number one. You could lose and you could just tailspin out of control, or you could lose, get it behind you, and then focus on moving forward, because it wasn't a district game anymore, which was a big plus. And his response to me, after our loss to Nease, it was somewhat of a wake-up call, and we realized our focus now is to go 9-1. So far, we are on track. Practices are more intense and competitive. We have more energy, and we are more confident heading into the rest of the season. So it really seems like we talked about, they said, hey, our new goal is 9-1. And you were out there at the Beachside game. It looks like they're finally starting to put together, and they're getting that momentum, and they're now walked away with their first district win, which is key this early in the race.
Yeah, it's nice to get that early district win. You don't get many of them, so to win the first one is a great way to kick things off, and it lets the rest of the district know as well that, hey, Ponte Vedra is for real, and they're here to if they want a shot at the district title, they got to deal with Ponte Vedra, because they're right there, and they're looking at a district title themselves. So,
and the other thing too is, in looking at this, because they've scored 52, I think, and they've allowed 59. It seems like they're able, especially in this Beachside game, which was 17-14, that they're able to put it together to hold these close games that they're having, and they're able to pull them out at the end.
Yeah, which speaks a lot to the team, right? To be able to pull out those close games, because I'm sure you'll have them as you get deeper into district play, and then if you make the playoffs, and you have the playoff games are typically pretty close, and they come down to that big the fourth quarter where you got to decide which way it's going to go for you, to be able to not just be in these close games, but to win them, to end up on the better end, most of the time is impressive. And I think it shows the mentality of this Sharks team that they've developed under Coach Price, and it's pretty strong, a nice strong mentality to have.
And it seems like, looking at the stats, Brian obviously carried the weight of it against Beachside. Drew had a good night. He went 10-19 for 133. Brian, here's what I'm getting at, though. You look at those 10 attempts, and Brian walked away with 30 carries for 213 yards. He averaged over 7.1 yards per carry. That's pretty impressive. 2 touchdowns, and then he also had an additional 13 receptions. But I do know that the offense did have 3 fumbles. As far as since the Nease game now, and seeing, it looks like they've kind of gone back to basics. They're relying on Brian to run the ball, even though we know that Drew can throw it. Do you really think at this point, because it sounds like it and it's looking like it, that this first district win is really the leapfrog for them into finishing their season very successful and hopefully winning their district title?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, this was the plan going in. The first game against Nease out of the gate didn't go as planned, but now they, like you were talking about earlier, they just, Brian said, they just kind of refocused, and, the plan was still in front of them. They just have a loss now, but the whole plan's in front of them, and they've just gotten back to what the plan was. And this was what, the expectations were originally going into the year. This was supposed to be a really quality Sharks team, with hopes of, and dreams of a district title and a playoff push, in mind. And so they're just kind of finally realizing, the plan that was in place during the off season and through, spring, training camp heading in, and just, starting to realize it. And it's great to see, and especially with Brian. Every game I'm taking photos, and I get him stiff arming a guy, every single game. I think he's probably maybe the best stiff armor in the area. and they just ride him, and everything kind of fuels through him on the offensive side of the ball.
Now, flipping over to the other side, we talk about the defensive front four. We talked about Eddie Jordan, how, he's a great quarterback and stuff, but we hadn't seen that line really tested, that offensive line. And I know you were out there for the first half. How did that defensive line look against the offensive line for Beachside? But more importantly, also, how was the offensive line? I know it sounds kind of crazy for me to ask that, but I'm saying is that I kind of expect the defensive line to do good, but this is kind of a wake-up call for the offensive line because their schedule hasn't been as heavy as some of these other teams that have been well established. They play that independent schedule. So I'm kind of curious as to what you saw out there and how Eddie fared against that in the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ponte Vedra, especially in the first half, the half that I was really there for, they definitely controlled things, and I would say the edge went to them for sure. They got a lot of pressure on Eddie, and he, it was a sloppy kind of field, so his, your uniforms are going to get dirty anyway, but his was extra dirty, So, I mean, they were definitely getting to him and rushing him, when it comes to his throws and all. And the second half, though, it seems like the Beachside offense was able to find some rhythm. So, yeah, I'm actually curious. It sounds like maybe the offensive line made some adjustments at halftime, came out and was able to at least, hold their own against the Ponte Vedra D-line. But, yeah, and especially in the first half, the Ponte Vedra D-line came out of the gate and was tearing it up. I mean, they were coming from all sides, too. It seemed like up the middle. Riker Kemp was coming from one side. I mean, they were just completely in control when it comes to up front and really allowed them to just, really not allow Beachside to get a rhythm at all offensively.
Where's the biggest change since the opening game for them that you think that you've seen from them that if they continue doing this, they're going to have a successful, run at this district title? Is there something that you're seeing that's different from them? Is it just that they're coming together, they're not panicking? Is it that they're starting to maybe shift to the run a little bit more and not rely on Drew as much in his arm? What do you seem to think? Or are they relying on the defense to keep the games close and win them at the end?
Yeah, I think defensively, I think they are, they're starting to kind of, hold their own. And that's, that's how you can win 17, 14 games. The offense does its part, but the defense, holds teams under 20. And I think the secondary is what's, I believe, continues to develop with each game that goes. They had a lot of guys that graduated from that secondary. That was one of the main question marks kind of circled. It's a very, inexperienced or young group in certain parts. So it was like, how are they going to be on the back end? And I think the secondary for Ponte Vedra is showing, they're kind of holding their own. They're sticking with guys on deep routes. They're defending, knocking balls down. And I think that, helps to help the quarterback, kind of the opposing quarterback has to read all his reads, and that just allows the guys up front to have plenty of time to pin their ears back and get to him. So I think the secondary on the defensive side is really starting to affect all the other levels. And then, offensively, just involving Brian Case, getting him in a rhythm, which he wasn't able to do against Nease in that opening game, and everything, then that opens up play action, and Drew can do his thing, and the receivers can do their thing. But really kind of that offensive line and Brian on the offensive side, it's kind of a run-first team, and then they want to play action off of that, and then the passing game just opens up. But you got to be able to run the ball. That's a big thing for them.
So now let's switch over. Second half, you drive over to Nease, catch the second half of the Nease Fletcher game. Now, before we go and we talk about this game, I do want to say one thing right now. And I don't criticize people that often and families and stuff, but I got to call something out here. I was waiting to talk to Nate after the game and get a soundbite from him that we'll play in just a second. But I got to tell you, so I don't know how many people he had there. He had this whole paparazzi here. And what's he doing? He's up like standing on top of the concrete seat. Do you know how the Nease seats go like up? So you actually have to jump up and hold on to the fence and stuff. And he's up there taking pictures and everything. I'm like, Nease doesn't need him to get hurt. We don't need him to fall down. I mean, if the Harrys need a separate section down at the end or something like that on the ground, let's do that. Let's take care of Nate, right? So give us a call. Give us a call, Mandy. We'll take care of it. We'll find something for you. But Nease does not need Nate getting hurt right now. But let's flip over to this game. I've heard it from people. I've heard it from people around different schools. They call and because they know that we cover them, and they're like, they just seem on fire. And here's some stats that I pulled that I wanted to share with you, Anthony, that was incredible between 2023 and 2024 and the 2024-25 season. These numbers from 2023 are for the first 4 games. Okay. So passing, they passed for 894 yards, 9 touchdowns total. Nate had 6, and there were 4 interceptions in those 4 games. Now you fast forward to this season with only 3 games, 571 passing, 298 rushing, a total of 8 touchdowns and no interceptions. The big thing that stands out to me there is they're protecting the ball. There's no interceptions there. And they seem to be doing it on both sides now and not relying on the pass. So that to me says a lot right there about the offense and how far they've come from the beginning of last season to this season.
Yeah, and we know they're an explosive offense, and they've got the potential to be that, under Coach Draft. So if you're not, giving the ball up and just giving the other team basically, free drives or halting your drive, you're going to have a lot more chances to score. And with that explosive offense that they have, they're most likely the majority of the time, probably 80%, they're going to end up capitalizing whether it's a field goal or a touchdown on those drives. So yeah, it increases your chances if you're not, ending drives with a turnover. So that's a huge thing.
And then here's something else I want to mention also is that on the rushing side, when you look at the average per rush that they're getting, last year Nease averaged 3.21. This year they're averaging 4.94. And when you look at that stat, I go back to my high school days, and I know a lot of people heard this from their high school coaches, where the coaches would say, just give me 4 yards. All I want is 4 yards of play. If you do that, we're going to be fine because you're going to get a first down. So the rushing and the amount of yards they're getting after is also incredible. And like you said, they're doing it on all around. And when you look at the defensive side of the ball, Anthony, in 2023, the defense was allowing 404 passing yards, but then they locked it down this year and they're only at 298, again, through 3 games. But then also rushing, it was 755 last year through 4 games, 377 this year. So the defense is getting it done as well.
Yeah, the defense continues to play at a high level and got that shutout, only the second under Coach Garth here, at Nease. So that's always a big deal when you can, put in the reserves in the second half and you see the starters over on the sideline, jumping up and down, rooting on the reserves, who came in the game off the bench to kind of help seal the shutout, and Fletcher was driving there late, but they were able to do it. So it just shows that this defense, even the guys on the bench are just, it's all in sync, and it's really been fun to watch. They're hard to run, they're hard to pass on. There's not many chinks in the armor right now.
Yeah, let me actually, like I said, I got to catch up with Nate Harry, the quarterback for Nease, after the game, and also Elijah Luckett. But let me play this sound clip for you real quick because I stopped with him, and the one thing I said, Anthony, was that when I asked Nate this, I said, here's the thing that I was curious about, is that the first 2 games they had to rely on the pass very heavily. And then on the game against the Senators, because of the weather conditions, everything else, they relied on the running game with KJ Perry. And I asked him how that offensive line was doing, how they were coming along, and here's what he had to say.
I would say that our offensive line is really coming together, and they're really trusting each other and trusting what we're doing, so we're able to do anything on the offensive side of the ball. We can run, pass, show teams that we can really beat them doing anything.
So I think right there, you hear it. The offensive line, which was probably one of the biggest question marks coming into the season for Nease, is becoming one of their biggest assets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. They replaced everyone, on the offensive line. That was one of the major emphasis. You have competition in camp, and that was one of the places where there was the most competition. Coach Draft was looking to see which guys would step up and take over in their new roles, and they've all just, we know how the offensive line. You got to trust the guy next to you, and it's got to be very cohesive. And they've just all stepped in and they've meshed together, and it's showing it out there, whether they're running the ball or passing it in pass protection. They're doing their part, and they've stepped right in, and that just really speaks to the Nease, just their whole game plan, and their whole strength and conditioning program. These guys they're big, they're fierce, and they're doing their job.
And I know you and I get a chance after the game to obviously talk to the players and the coaches, and I caught up with Elijah Luckett after the game, and you and I have talked about how that defense has come together. I know you did a great piece on Shamar McNair. And however, when you listen to the sound clip from Eli, I asked him first about his role changing from, having Kirill there last year, and now he's the leader with Cash Coble on the other side. But I also start to ask him about what has brought this team together. And in listening to him and seeing his face as he talked to me, I realized this isn't just the defense coming together. This is actually the entire team.
Yeah, exactly. So, as you know, last year, Kirill was, like my mentor. He would teach me the way of DB, so Cash, he's a sophomore. So And he just switched from receiver, so, I'm just teaching him, just stay patient, stay deep, don't let the double moves or your eyes mess you up, all in general.
Let me ask you this. The only other question I have for you is that when you usually see a defense come out the first year with as many changes you guys had, it takes time to get into a rhythm. You guys have been in a rhythm since day one. How's that happen as a coach? Garth, it's just you guys are all melding together like a family. What is it? Because you guys look great out there.
Oh, I think it's really Coach Garth. He over the summer he had a group of us go on a college tour, and I feel like that brought us closer together. He's done like 7 p.m. lifts with us. I think it's just a bond in general. Like, we all playing for each other. And, as Charlie, he got hurt, our teammate. We're doing this for Charlie. We're doing this for the team in general. Nobody's being selfish. So that's why.
I think that seems to be the theme that you and I are hearing pretty much, is that it's all for the team. It's not individual.
Yeah, no. And I mean, that's the perfect mindset to have defensively. It's we win and we lose. And as a defense, and then that's just what Coach Garth has always preached, and that's and since he's been back, I mean, it's been revolutionary for the on that defensive side of the ball, and these guys are really performing, and it's pretty fun to watch. Just even down there on the field, you can just see the speed and the physicality that the whole unit has.
All right, shall we switch over to our picks this week and talk about the upcoming games? I think we should. I think it's about time. All right, so let's start off with Ponte Vedra Beach, and they're going to travel down and play the Falcons of Menendez. I like the Sharks in this one. I think that we're going to see another probably run-heavy game. I think Brian's having a lot of success back there. I think Drew does open up the run for him a little bit, because there is that threat that he could scramble, because he did have some rushing yards. Actually, I have him right here. He actually did have some rushing yards in last week's game. He had 12 carries for 58 yards, so he's averaging over 4 yards per carry as well. I think the receivers like David Doherty are also getting some experience and coming along. And I think that defense still is going to hold the Falcons in check, probably to 14-17. But I do like Ponte Vedra in this game.
Yeah, I do too. And that game it's actually going to be on Thursday night in the Shark Tank at 7. So.
Oh, did I say? I did. I said traveling too. I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. They're hosting this one.
Yeah, they're hosting, and it's going to be on Thursday night. So just so people know, if they want to do a little doubleheader action, go to see Thursday night game, and then go down to St. Aug, catch some Friday night action with Nease.
Yeah, there's been some scheduling changes I noticed also with JV. So I'm not sure if it's because of the rain the last couple of weeks or whatnot, but it seems like things are getting shifted around. So thanks again for mentioning that one. So, and then on Friday night, this is the big one right here. We got St. Aug and Nease. Right now in the state, St. Augustine's ranked number 20. Nease is ranked 21. You've got, Lachlan Hewlett, who is a Wake Forest commit. And they're kind of reeling from last year's state championship loss also in their district. And you shared a stat with me earlier. What was it about St. Augustine beating Nease? I forgot.
Yeah, it's, everyone knows of it as the rivalry, and they've been playing forever. But actually, the Yellow Jackets have won the last 6 meetings between the teams. The Panthers haven't won since 2018 in the rivalry. So I'm sure they're looking to end that streak and start a winning streak of their own.
Well, let's see here. I think, I think that streak's going to end. I'm going to go and call it right now. I like Nease in this game. I know it's at St. Augustine. By the way, I did hear that the ROTC programs for both schools are just putting on a heck of a military appreciation night down at St. Augustine. I think they're doing like Nease versus St. Augustine flag football game beforehand. They're going to have all different kinds of, I think, military vehicles down there and stuff like that. It sounds like a great night. So they're really building this up for the rivalry it is. I think Nease comes into this only allowing 14 points. I think they're going to give Lachlan a look that he probably hasn't seen in a while. And I think this team is fired up and clicking on all cylinders. Do I think it's going to be a blowout? No. Do I think it's going to be a shootout? No. I think it's probably going to be somewhere around 24-17 possibly, around that kind of scoring area, maybe even 2017 or 2014. Mm-hmm. But I am going to call my shot here, and I'm going to call that Nease is going to break that streak.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's going to be a good game. Either way, I know there's been a lot of shootouts in the rivalry of late. The last 6 meetings that I talked about, 4 of them, the Yellow Jackets were the winner, and they scored over 40 points. I don't think that's going to be the case this year with the Panthers and the way they're playing defense. So I see a much more tighter, calculated game, and where possession really becomes a factor, and kind of maybe which team has the ball last, but not in a shootout kind of format. It's not going to be, I don't think, 45-40. It's going to be more like 24-20, so, and it's because, with Nease's defense, I don't see any team really getting to those numbers this year, but we'll see, how they go. I know St. Augustine does have an explosive offense of their own. They've always got a bunch of athletes as well, and it's just going to be a great game down there in St. Aug.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that you mentioned time of possession, and I got to ask you a question about that because you just reminded me of something. We watched Nease last year, and you used the word earlier in the show. You said that they could be very explosive at times, and they still can, right? But it wasn't uncommon to see big plays being made by Braden Felder or Maddox Spencer, for the touchdown. Also, the defense is back out there. Now it seems like this offense that's now being called by drafts is more, how do I say it, methodical. I don't say it wasn't before, but it seems like he's happy getting that 10, 15-yard gain. He's happy getting that 6-yard drive. And the time of possession way in their favor, especially against the Senators. It seems like that also really helps the defense. Obviously, they're on the side, but it's got to be frustrating for the other side's offense because they're not getting a chance to get out there and perform. And they're just like I said, their averages. They're just gaining enough to get the second down, the third down, and all of a sudden that's manageable. Another first down, and they get another set. So how much of a factor do you think that's going to play in the Friday night's game?
I do think it's going to be a factor, not that they, both teams, couldn't, have like a 2-play drive where they have a big, huge, explosive, 60-yard run or 60-yard pass. But I think the way Drafts has really been calling it, I think there's really a lot of confidence there. Like he has a lot of confidence right now in all the pieces that he has on offense, and with Nate, calling the shots and as the signal caller. And I think he just, I think he believes every play that he's calling in, and at this point, and so he knows, we can do it either way. We can score in 3 plays and have a big chunk play, or we can, methodically just pick up 10 yards at a time, first down, knowing that we're marching down the field and we're going to score. I think they started almost every drive, I feel like, with a confidence that this is going to end in the end zone. So it doesn't matter how many plays it takes to get there. We're going to end in the end zone. And I just feel like, the confidence is just, you can almost feel it in the play calling. And
if it's not going to get in the end zone, Tyler Gazanfari's done a fantastic job coming in kicking for, Danny Jones, who graduated. I think he had 3 field goals, I think, on Friday night. So, and if you can get it down into the 20 or 25 at least for him, he's gonna make it for you. And the one he did miss was a very weird angle for him. But like I said, I've been impressed with his kicking skills. So they're doing on special teams as well.
Yeah, no, and to have a kicker like that, at the high school level that can make the difference in a deep playoff run, at the end of the year, because you play these close games and 3 points can make all the difference in the world. And if you have a guy that you can rely on like Tyler, that's just, that's money.
It is money. And I guess it's also money for you this week because you get to catch 2 complete games since they're on Thursday and Friday.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it, to see, to kind of just enjoy a full game instead of having to leave at halftime, and just kind of just soak in the entire game, get a real sense of how it goes and what's going on.
Awesome. Well, as usual, I'll see you the second half on the track over at St. Augustine when they're playing Nease. So thanks as always for this week. I'm looking forward to, now we're just full steam ahead, right? Districts are kicking off. We got the schedule's going to be fantastic. So I think it's going to be, again, great football in St. Johns County.
Yeah. This is why we're fans,
Yeah. As always, everyone, be sure to check out Anthony, subscribe to him. He's got a great Twitter account. X is ANTNY Rich. That is ANTNY Rich. And then also, as always, he's got some great articles for you to go to read covering high school sports at the Ponte Vedra Recorder. For Anthony Richards, I'm the Todd. Thank you for listening to the 32081 Scoreboard Show.
Thank you for listening to the 32081. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
I love the show, guys. You're awesome.
Please don't forget to subscribe to the show so you can join us for the next episode.
I never miss an episode. It's the best.
Until next time, take care.